Welcome back, and super excited this week. We've got our first celebrity special guest. You may know him as the Prime Minister, Pete Nice from Third Base. And Pete, super excited that you're here today.
Terry, what's up? It's great to be with you. I'm here at the Hip Hop Museum in the Bronx, the newly constructed or in construction museum. In my office, I'm also one of the curators at the Hip Hop Museum, along with my partner, Paradise Gray, who was in the X Clan. So, as you said, I'm third base, he's X Clan. We have a company called X to the Third that we do all of our curation and production products. So, who would have thought that the X Clan and third base would have joined forces for the sake of hip hop and preservation of hip hop history? So that's what we're all about. You know that from my relationship with you, just in collecting, because you're a sick person who has a disease of collecting like we do. We need help. So and apparently you just want to show we just want to show people how much help we need.
Well, Pete, I'm super glad you're here. And, the audience doesn't know, but you've been super instrumental in just educating me about hip hop, probably taught me more about hip hop than anyone else. I'm just a fan. You're the expert, and I'm super glad you're here today to show off some of your items. Um, yeah, I mean, I owe so much to your help in terms of understanding what I was collecting, and so I'm really appreciative and glad that you're here today.
Right. No, thank you. And I would preface that I appreciate the accolade, but I wouldn't consider myself an expert. Like, I mean, I don't even, although people call us historians too, we're kind of like all amateur historians. And, I think that in terms of, I might be an expert on like hip hop tickets from 1977 to, 83. But like, we know we all share information. And I don't think, you know, there's too many quote unquote experts out there. It's just we're all in the same boat learning about hip because we learn things every day. Like, and, I can only learn things because, my history in hip hop started in the early 80s. Like, I'm talking to guys who were going to parties in 1971. So, like, if we didn't talk to these guys and interview them and get their perspective of what they actually lived, like, we wouldn't be able to, save some of these artifacts that, are buried in a closet somewhere. So, that's basically, what our mission is here at the museum. And obviously, you as a collector have an interest just in history and preserving the history, which is great because you've saved a lot of stuff as well. I mean, look at all the stuff that could have went into a garbage pail or just been sold off on eBay to someone who might never share it with anyone. So that's why stuff that we have, stuff that's donated, stuff that's loaned. I mean, you've even we've been trying to work out something where you can loan some things to the museum, and obviously we appreciate your considering us.
No, I mean, any chance I can get to help, I'm happy to do. And I was really lucky that you wanted some of the stuff that I had. I mean, I remember when you guys opened up in the Bronx for that first show in the temporary space. And I was so proud to have, one of the pieces that I collected. I think it was a Curtis Blow poster
Yeah, it
from,
was the Curtis Blow LA poster. Was it Compton? Yeah,
yeah,
which was significant.
I think it was even from Alonzo Williams' nightclub, The Eve in Compton, which is super cool. And I think if I remember correctly, you told me that when Curtis came to the opening, he saw the poster and was kind of like, "Wow."
Yeah. No, he definitely freaked out when he saw that. And that happens a lot. Like people will come in, and we even had in that pop up that year, we had a whole blow up one of Joe Conzo's photos of the Cold Crush brothers performing, and I think it was Roosevelt High School. And I mean, not just for the performers, but like there's a picture of the crowd, all the kids in the crowd, and the guy comes in, he's like, "Yo, that's me," because he's like pointing at his picture, like 1981, just being at the jam. So it's not just artists like Curtis. It's like, the fans connect with everything as well. And, people who, pay the dollar or $2 to go see these shows, which created the foundation, for everything that's come since.
Well, it's super impressive what you and Paradise have done. Really starting from an idea and to where it is now. And I was fortunate enough to meet Paradise in Miami during Art Basel. You guys had invited me to a celebration, and he was just the most humble, sweet guy. And man, I just really felt special to be involved. So thank you very much for that. What's going on with the museum? Do you want to give a little update on what's going on with that?
Yeah, we just had this big like gala dinner the other night, and Nas actually stepped up and committed to donate $1 million along with his casino project and his partner Peter Bitterbender, who's one of the board members of the museum. He's been with the museum for years. And then there's another private individual who matched their $1 million as well. So a gala is a fundraiser. So we raised some significant funds in the gala, but we still have a ways to go on our like capital campaign. So we're constructing the interior of the museum and designing all the exhibits. And you know, our executive director Rocky Bucano has said that the end of 2026. So that's what we're working towards. But this project has been going on for Paradise brought me on because Paradise has been with the museum at least like 12 or 13 years, and I've been down with the museum 10 years. So it's a long haul, and but we're getting closer to the finish line. So and that's why even doing just something with you gets the word out there, that people can donate to the museum. And that's and yeah, that being said, we also have not had a separate budget to acquire and purchase artifacts. So that's why, even yourself as a private collector, there are private collectors that we would love to have an opportunity to buy something from them. And that's where, first of all, we don't have a fund. Second, we probably couldn't afford it. And third, that's why if a collector is willing to loan, a major item to the museum, that would be great. And uh, we actually just got on loan and it was on display at the gala, the Biggie crown. So that was big.
That's unbelievable. That's
Yeah.
such
So,
a
so a friend of the museum, his name is Ryan. He had purchased it's the first crown that he tried on and like didn't fit. So Baron Claiborne had taken that off and then ripped the whatever material was inside the other one and fitted on Biggie's head. So there were two. The first one was sold at Sotheby's, and then Baron Claiborne, the photographer, sold this first one privately. So we have on loan from Ryan the the first crown. So that's what I'm saying. You never know where something's going to come up or a connection. Adam Silverstein, our director of archives, he met him in Switzerland of all places. So like you never know where stuff's going to pop up.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned Switzerland. I have a client who, resides part-time in Switzerland who is seriously getting into hip hop and starting to collect these artifacts. So I don't know what's going on with Switzerland or what they're putting in the water there, but
Right. Well, hip hop is worldwide, so but we are transmitting live from where everything started here in the Bronx. So
right. So you're right now in the Bronx at the Hip Hop Museum in your office, correct?
yeah, well, we because we're under construction in the main building, we have like an annex in this place called the Bronx Terminal Market. That's where you went to the pop up. You had your Curtis Blow poster in the pop up in this general area. So we have our curatorial offices in here, studio to shoot interviews, and then we have a gift shop, just temporarily as we open up the museum or work towards opening it. This is our like space. We just actually had a great seminar and conference last night on early wall writing and graffiti with from the Philadelphia area with Kool Earl and the Klepto Kid and all these early legends from Philly writing community, and they just got to tell their story, some of them for the first time in many years. So that's the other thing we're doing with this space, having hosting events and educational just gatherings.
No, that's terrific. And I want to get to the show and tell, but I just have a couple other things quickly. I feel like one of the special things about you is that you're very humble in saying you're not an expert, but you were signed, you were touring with Public Enemy, you guys were on the, a lot of success. And then after your own success with your own group, Third Base, you were influential in the success of artists like MF Doom. And you've done so many cool things, but you also came at it with the mentality of a collector, which is save everything. Whenever anyone says save the receipts in hip hop collecting, they're talking about you. I mean, you come up with these like, scraps of paper, I mean, the audience will see once you start showing us stuff, but I mean, it's incredible the things that you had the foresight to save. And I wonder, did that come from you being a collector? I know we've discussed baseball cards in the past, and I've shown you some of my cards. And, is that collector mentality something that's just like a gene that you have?
I think so. Me and Paradise, like kind of where we bonded was we had collected, like you said, baseball cards, comic books. He even had a little coin collection through his brother. So, as you come up as a kid and you're collecting stuff, it's just kind of, yeah, you're right. It's kind of like ingrained. I don't know if you're like programmed to like collect and look out for things. So then when Paradise, who was a couple of years older than me and started early in hip hop and was right in the middle of the Bronx, he would see like a Grandmaster Flash flyer, like in the barber shop or like on a post, and he would actually take it, and him and his boys would like collect those like baseball cards, which really is the birth of collecting hip hop. So like Paradise, like in many ways, is like the grandfather of like hip hop collecting, and his collection represents that because, like, listen, I have flash flyers that I acquired from different people. He has it from like he went to the show at the Audubon Ballroom, and he loved the flyer because the character was drawn to look like Iron Man, and that related to his love of comics. So yeah, it's just crazy, and I, even as I, was an MC in Third Base, I would just hold on to a flyer, pick up the lyrics on the floor in the studio. Like that's why I think I told you about that when we did Gas Phase with Prince Paul out in the studio Island Media out in Long Island. We had written all our lyrics on the Long Island Railroad heading out to the studio from the city, and Doom was with us and his brother Sub, rest in peace to both of them. But they Doom had written his rhyme in like one of the marbleized composition books, and me and Serge were just jotting them down on sheets of paper. And in the studio, we're finished with the song, and like Serge threw his lyrics on the ground, dropped them, like throwing them in the garbage. And I just, because I'm sick like you, I picked, picked them up and just threw them in a rhyme book that I did have. And 30 years later, I'm looking at it and I'm like, Doom, because the way we constructed the song was, it was going to be me, then Serge, then Doom. Doom and his boys in Long Beach had come up with this whole term of the gas phase. So that's why, this was the perfect way. I mean, Doom was very talented, and his brother Sub were very talented. So we're like, this is our crew that we want to put on our record and give him the light. And then we were also going to manage him as well. So, there was some, business interest in it as well. But like, we're young kids. We haven't even put out our own record yet, let alone, manage someone else's career. So really, by putting him down on that record, it introduced him to the world and ended up getting him his record deal. But in his own idiosyncrasy, he was like wrote on the back of one of Search's lyrics the way he suggested the lineup would go. And Don Newkirk, rest in peace, who was a singer who was related to Prince Paul professionally and ended up signing to Def Jam. he just was hanging out, and Paul was like, "Yo, why don't you introduce each guy?" And then Doom was like, "All right," and he actually wrote out what he wanted Don Newkirk to say, introducing us. And then I have Doom's handwriting with the instructions on the other side of like part of Search's lyrics. So it's crazy the things that and I didn't realize I had those till like years after. So
That's absolutely incredible. And these pieces, this is exactly this is what's fun about collecting this stuff is when a piece can explain the history better than anyone telling when a piece encapsulate the history of a moment is just so it's really special, and obviously
right.
you were a part of so many of those moments, in people's minds, especially people of my age who went through the 80s as their formative years and late 80s and into the 90s. It's really special. uh,
I'm, I'm I'm putting on my white gloves here just for a second because on that note of like me and Paradise collecting things and archiving hip hop history, so as well as Paradise, I would consider him like the godfather of collecting. The real godfather of collecting, just on another level, is Easy AD from the Cold Crush Brothers. So like on one level, he's foundational MC, one of the original Cold Crush. He was the first Cold Crush MC because before there's the known Cold Crush, the Cold Crush brothers had Whipper Whip and this guy Mr. T, uh, AD, and Dada Rock, MC Dada Rock, and the other ones went to the Fantastic Five after that. So this is like in 1979, and AD is the first person to archive hip hop professionally. He worked with the Schomburg, and I think it was like in 1999 or so, did a small exhibition, and he has loaned his entire collection to the Hip Hop Museum, and he even saved like the Cold Crush Brother trophies. So this is the trophy that the Cold Crush Brothers won on a night in 1981, I believe. This is the night they won best performing group, but this is the night that Busy Bee battled Kumo D.
That is insane.
Yeah, so this is the actual trophy. Now, the nameplate actually fell off the trophy, and AD and Joe Conzo had shared like a storage unit. So I have Joe Conzo looking through the storage to find the nameplate that slipped off of the actual trophy. So, it's just crazy. Like this is the type of stuff. This is another one of his trophies that was awarded to him by Van Silk, who's one of our good friends who also actually Van Silk, not only is he one of the major early collectors, his collection, he was the first person to come up with the concept for a hip hop museum. And he had his own mini museum on 125th Street at his record store called Fat Flavor, which he was partners with K Slay, DJ K Slay, rest in peace. So this is a trophy that Van Sil gave to the Cold Crush Brothers. His name back then was RC Pac Jam. So RC Productions, 1983, Best Stage Performer, Cold Crush Brothers. So, it
Wow.
looks like a little bowling trophy that your mother might get or your uncle might get, but like the cultural significance of it is crazy because when you see these flyers and it's like trophy given or $100 prize, like in the $1 billion industry that hip hop is, these are the guys who created it, and this is where it came from. Like it's amazing to look at it that way. And a guy like Easy AD, is, I mean, he saved everything. These are Easy AD's gold boots from around 1983, 84. This is when these guys were like performing with Rick James, like the Furious Five. You see those flyers and posters you have where they're doing the joint performances, and these guys started dressing a little freaky, so as evidenced by AD's gold boots. So you know, it's just I'm glad that you brought that up because it's good to give a shout out and a mention to these guys who, you know, are really like the grandfathers of hip hop collecting.
Yeah, I mean, those items are amazing, and it's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, I know from just our relationship, how much stuff the museum has been able to get, how much stuff you and Paradise have been able to get, and it is incredible. And I just wanted to ask you, like, I know that like maybe 10 years ago, we would be bidding on eBay, like, and oftentimes something would come up and one of us would win and the other would be the underbidder because there just weren't that many people who were interested in this stuff. Is that a fair thing to say that it's a more recent that with the Sotheby's auctions and with other auction houses? I know you're involved with an auction house. Is it fair to say that it's more recent that the hip hop material has kind of taken on these prices that have grown really, really, really astronomical?
Yeah, I mean, because hip hop memorabilia is on probably rarer or more scarce, like the significant historical items. There hasn't been like a big market created with numerous collectors, but like that has been growing. So you have like several major collectors who will end up competing in an auction. Look at the Kool Herc auction, where Cindy Campbell and Kool Herc sold the majority of their collection, and look at the prices. Like a Hevalo flyer that we had never seen before goes for 20, $40,000. Twilight Zone, 20 some odd $1,000. These are record prices. And, the way we look at it, it's not about the money or the value. It's about the significance of the history. But hey, it is a commodity and a collectible. And when you bring Sotheby's or Christie's into the mix, that legitimizes it more like in the overall collecting world. Now, I wouldn't say that's 100% a good thing either, because then, it just kind of marginalizes what those guys did back then. Like, here's a piece that Kool Herc has. Luckily, he saved it and can, uh, be rewarded with like a monetary, uh, bonus that he had it. Other guys, who didn't save their stuff might see a flyer selling with them on it for $1,000 and they're not getting any money out of it. You know what I'm saying? So it's like all the guys in hip hop, and even up to myself in my era, first guys made nothing. We made next to nothing. Like we only made show money. We never got a royalty check from Def Jam or Russell Simmons or whatever. So like, there's a lot of people in hip hop who got ripped off. Labels made all the money. You know, just a horrible situation. Like one of the things that we collect as well are the actual record contracts of our compadres. And when you look at some of these record contracts, it's really pathetic. And it just shows you, also exposes how the rap record industry started. And you know, you also have to give them a little pass there too, because record industry in general was run by partly by the mob. So you have a lot of different situations where, yeah, there were very few artists who made a financial dent in the industry and were able to survive on that. And it's sad how even with Jay-Z saying, referencing the Cold Crush. I don't know Jay-Z ever cutting a little check to any of the Cold Crush brothers. So that's just reality. But as museum, and for what we can do, when Easy AD agrees to loan his collection, we try to get a benefactor to come up and give him some compensation for doing that. And he and in someone in his position, if we get the right benefactor, maybe Easy AD can make a decision to sell his collection for a big number, like you're saying, like the number that's created by things selling at Sotheby's and Christie's and what they're really worth. And then he can benefit for his own life and for his commitment and his career.
Yeah, no, and that sounds like a really laudable thing. My frame of reference is comic books, and I think back to, guys like Jack Kirby, who was probably getting paid $50 a page to make these pages, and now they're going at auction in the high hundreds of thousands, if not in the millions, right?
Right.
So,
That's crazy.
I mean, and
And I'm a huge fan of my friend, rest in peace, Phase Two. Phase Two listed Jack Kirby as like one of his influences, just in his illustrating and his art. So, it just shows you how comics and hip hop kind of intertwine at different times, and just art in general.
well, I love how Doom, took on the persona of this character that Kirby created. I think
Right.
there's such a crossplay between comics and hip hop in terms of battles and collaborations and people,
Well, you even look on some of the early flyers. You have Superman, versus Wonder Woman. Like there was this one flyer, Battle of the Sexes, between a female DJ and Grandmaster Flash.
uh,
So other ones with the Flash versus the Hulk. It's just crazy how everything overlaps.
how about DJ Clark Kent? And
Right.
you've just
Well,
got,
you have the original Clark Kent, and then you have my Clark Kent, rest in peace, who was my DJ on our radio show. But yeah, just even the names, it's amazing.
yeah, and in those early hip hop songs from, the late 70s, early 80s, referencing, Superman and other characters. I mean, it just seems to be, I always thought that was cool. But uh, not to interrupt your show and tell, but you did mention the Christie's auction. And so I wanted to hold up this flyer, which I think you're familiar with, and just wanted to kind of get your,
Right.
hear what you
I,
had to say about that.
I was actually last night at our event. We had Riff 170, the famous writer, and he designed and drew that flyer for Kool Herc, as you know. So, that's also where the writing and graffiti world intersect with the early hip hop world, because really when you look at the Hevelo, that club was probably the first place where Herc started to do more of like the quote unquote merry-go-round, where he would extend beat and break beat into break beat. So that and he even the when that flyer surfaced, everyone had spelled the name of the club wrong for like 20. If you look in every history book ever written about hip hop before the Christie's auction, spell the Hevelo Hevalo. And then some people would even say that the Hevelo Club was named after, a song that the Hevelo. It's like it was a very known line, and like a Latin influence line, and had nothing to do with it. So we spoke to this guy DJ John Brown, who was one of the earliest DJs. Went to the high school with Kool Herc, and he's like, "No, that was I." He goes, "I was the first DJ at the Hevelo before Herc, and it was called the Hevelo because the bartender at my prior club, Bob Hevelo, opened the club. So his name was Helow, and there it is. So by that flyer surfacing, now we know even more of the history about the club. So yeah, and as you know, you paid quite a pretty penny for for that flyer and another one. So, but that just shows you how the rarity and the real history that was revealed just by Cindy and Herc offering those flyers to the general public, allowed us as collectors, and the museum didn't have a budget, but me, Paradise, and our boy Short Shot LaRock, and our boy Brandon Himmel, actually, yeah, as you know, we had a couple of arrangements where, oh, we won't bid on this one, but you can't bid on this one, those types of arrangements. So we ended up with certain items, and now we're able to loan those items to the museum. So we'll have a great Kool Herc representation in the museum. And as well, we have a great relationship with Kool Herc's brother Kenny, and I will throw another show and tell at you.
Yeah, let's see it.
You see what's behind me right here?
Are you pointing to that equipment?
Yes. This is a Space Echo RE201 from Roland, and this is Kool Herc's echo chamber that was at all of his parties from 1974 on. And the echo chamber is significant because that's what him and Coke LaRock would basically do the original emceeing which was more like shouting people out and saying slick lines. But the echo portion of that is what the crowd really gravitated towards. And this is the actual Kool Herc echo chamber that we acquired from Herc's brother. So that's I mean that's like a piece of like game used equipment is the equivalent with and that was at every one of those, that was at the Hevalo, like that flyer, this piece of equipment was right there that night in 1975.
That's absolutely amazing. You mentioned that, there are some good things and some bad things about Sotheby's and Christie's getting into the hip hop game, and I tend to agree. I think, and this happens to be fair, not just in hip hop, in any auction situation. But I remember on those flyers, and I think even you pointed this out to me, that Kenneth Bird is the artist who drew those flyers, Riff 170. But
Right,
Christie's didn't even mention that he was a graffiti artist and his name was
right.
Riff 170 in the listing. Um,
And they wouldn't know, like I mean, that's why they didn't have like a hip hop historian, on call to like go through everything with them. So, but I mean, actually, we did point out a couple of things when we got the viewing, and because they couldn't update it, that there were a couple of things that slid under the radar. One of which was this flyer that Short Shot got from the Executive Playhouse, the Nasty Coke flyer. So, so in a way, sometimes it's good that if you're a collector, sometimes you want an auction house not to have all the information, right?
yeah, I mean, it's complicated, right? You got to balance being a collector and wanting everyone to have a fair shot at it. Sometimes when you're a collector, the greed takes over, and yeah, you
Also,
really.
like look on eBay when something is mislisted, and you either can try to approach the buyer to buy it outright, or you just have to wait and cross your fingers that no one else discovers it. And sometimes that happens. Like that one I was telling you about, the first Def Jam poster with the Rick Rubin party at the Hotel Diplomat. It's like it was up there for what 10 days, and I was the only bidder because it was mislisted.
Wow. Yeah, I do remember that. That's one of those ones that you remember.
Yeah,
And
that's like a once in a decade type thing.
well, for me also, I think the very first one, my first regret piece in collecting hip hop posters was, do you remember that Curtis Blow poster that I mentioned?
The Mr. Magic.
Yes.
Yeah, well, that one was even more painful to me because when I used to go to high school, I would go up Eastern Parkway towards high school, and I would see that exact poster stapled to like the lamppost. And like when I saw that that was off and we missed out on it, I was just kicking myself. I was
Yeah.
thrilled to have, I mean, for personal nostalgia reasons more than anything. I mean, it's a great poster, but yeah, sometimes things just disappear.
Yeah, and this goes back to about, like 10 years ago, maybe more. I don't really know, but we were bidding on these things online. They would pop up and they would go for like a couple $100 maybe. And sometimes they would just sit there. I mean, some of my best posters I got through eBay and they're maybe spent $300 on them.
Right,
And
right.
I feel like those days are long over.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the guys who are, the big time flyer collectors like DJ Ross, Short Shot, those guys who were, I mean, listen, I collected flyers more like of my shows and stuff like that before that. Paradise, of course, had his flyers from when he went to the Flash Jams, but Short Shot and guys like DJ Ross got in like maybe early to late '90s into collecting flyers when people weren't, and they actually were collecting records too, and that's how they came into like groups of flyers, like from a record dealer who got a collection of flyers. They're like, oh, shit is cool, and next thing you know, Phase Two also contributed to that because he did he wrote an article on his, you know, creation of flyers in the 1993 Source that had Bambaataa Flash and Herc on the cover, like kind of like the hip hop anniversary issue, and the Source, graphically showed, illustrated like numerous Phase Two flyers, and like had him writing about his history and flyers and how important they were to document the history. And that's actually what inspired Short Shot to actually collect. So that's coming right from the grandfather of flyers, Phase, which
Yeah, that's incredible. For our viewers who may not be familiar with Phase Two, because you certainly educated me about him, could you kind of explain a little bit about who he was on a basic level? I mean, to me, I feel like he's one of the most significant artists in hip hop, but is that fair to say, or
yeah, no, I mean, Phase Two, I became very close with him, one of my closest friends in the last 3 or 4 years of his life. Um, he was like a legendary figure just to me, like almost like meeting, like if you're gonna meet Babe Ruth, if you were a baseball fan, like the guy who like just was at the pinnacle of everything. Like he started out as a writer, he revolutionized what would become graffiti. Like he hated using, I mean, although he also founded International Graffiti Times. Later in his life, he rejected the word graffiti because he felt it had been bastardized. But he came up with the word toy for someone who was had no skill writing. He was featured in Newsweek in October of 1973 as like the style master with his full picture in Newsweek, where he's clearly wearing, like when you look at it, also influencing fashion in hip hop and the lingo. And also he would go to these clubs like the Plaza Tunnel, and him and his boys would be doing the dance moves, like the earliest forms of breaking, like the pre-breaking with up rocks and all these different dips that he described, from these clubs. And he was a DJ and he was an MC, and then he ended up creating all the flyers for everyone from Herc to Grandmaster Flash and all the way through to the 1990s. He even he did flyers up to like Company Flow and other stuff in the 90s and 2000s. So he's like he's the original hip hop historian. He's one of the greatest artists of the century. And when he passed, we lost all of his information. I learned the majority of what I know about early hip hop from Phase Two. So in terms of the history, but also him as like an actual artist through his painting, through what he did on the trains, and through what he did on the flyers. And oddly enough, the flyers were like his favorite thing to do because it connected directly with the artists, with all the MCs that he knew, and guys that he looked up to, like Flash, Melly Mel, Scorpio, these guys. And he was there. He could call everybody out and say, like, you weren't at that party and you weren't doing that dance at this party. And he was not adverse to like really calling people out. And when we had this event last night with the early Philly writers, one of the people that he called out in particular was, the writer Cornbread from Philly. And, I mean, if anyone kept it real and keeping, your facts straight and the truth, like his nickname, moniker, True Mathematics, just call him Praise True or True, he was the truth.
wow, yeah. I mean, you've just shared so much knowledge about him. The things that blew my mind about him were, I once saw a couple sculptures that he did, and I was just like, I was confused and just mystified, and like they were so beautiful and hard to comprehend. Um, but you
That's
know,
what I'm saying. Like when you say the sculptures, I was sitting with him one day and we were going through some of his old flyers, and I flipped one of the flyers around and I see like these drawings of like a men's suit and these like things that look like the Calvin Klein logo. And I'm like, yo, what's this? He's like, oh yeah, I did the Calvin Klein logo. They ripped me off. Like, so he actually did the early Calvin Klein logo that went to their marketing person and they went with it through somebody else. And, he never saw a dime for it. And, the proof was right there. So it's insane.
I always thought that his flyers were something that should be brought back for shows today, that contemporary artists should be doing posters and flyers in that style again as kind of like an
I,
honor. a
There
way to.
actually are. Like actually, if you look on Instagram now for shows that are even happening in the next couple of weeks, people are incorporating. I mean, what I think they should also do is mention it on the flyer that it's a tribute to him, and not just actually, use his style or Buddy Esquire for that matter, who is the other great flyer, artist. Those two kind of ran neck and neck, but like as Faze would definitely tell you, like he was number one.
Well,
And Buddy would say that as well because he was influenced by Faze. Faze started before him, and but Buddy Esquire was incredible too. I mean, his work, those two are like the big two.
no, that's incredible. I see there's a hat behind you. Is that what I'm seeing?
There's a couple of hats. This one right here is Jam Master Jay's hat. Now, this is one that he wore, but he gave it to Faith Newman, who was A&R at Def Jam, and Faith actually, was friends with everybody, and Jay just gave her the hat, and of course, Jay had some other beaver hats that were much more expensive, but this is one of the ones that Run DMC had manufactured, I think, through Adidas. So you have the logo on the inside, but Jay did wear this hat and gave it to Faith. Faith is one of our board members on for the Hip Hop Museum, and she graciously donated this to the Hip Hop Museum. So that's just another situation where someone in hip hop who's worked in hip hop and has had a great career signed Nas. And actually, in mentioning Nas, this is all right. So this is actually the actual one master metal tape of Illmatic that
Wow.
this is the first time anyone ever heard Illmatic on this tape from the mastered copy from Master Disc. And Sony Music, January 14th, 1994. And Faith donated that to the museum as well. Um, this one hasn't aged as well, I don't think. This is the master dat for Nas and R. Kelly Street Dreams. So that's not as historically important as Illmatic, but this is cool. Also, the song One Love. This is a master tape from for the single when the single was mastered, and then a dat master dat for the song Affirmative Action. So, you know, we collect the audio, we collect the hats, anything that's hip hop, you know, we feel, needs to be represented. Like, and as a collector, you just think of all the different types of items that you could collect. There's so many different sub categories. I mean, you're kind of like the category guy because you're the poster guy, but you like branched off into other, now you're the test press guy.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that. I don't know if you've had a chance to see any of our episodes. We have a co-host, Johnny, who is a longtime Atlantic Records, Warner Music
And
Group.
I saw them. I saw he had like a Beastie Boy one that had some sort of, goo on it or something that, was like, but, despite that, it's still, rare, one of the rarest pieces, right?
Well, you really taught me a lot. I was coming from something in collecting where I felt like condition was really important. Maybe it's because it's sports cards. Maybe it was because, in original comic art, you don't want dirt on it. You want it to be legible and clean, or in comic books. And you kind of taught me that, hey, like a poster that's been hung outside and has kind of been exposed to the elements is much more hip hop than a poster that is in mint condition, that it was never hung up outside. And that really stuck with me. I feel like, a little bit of grime is not a bad thing when you're collecting this stuff that was like used in production.
Right. No, I mean that's why if you see some of the flyers were taped up on someone's wall in their bedroom. The posters were hung out on lampposts. Like that's like the game used type element that you could bring sports into hip hop where, I mean, that's in my travels just through different collections. Like if a collection doesn't have a couple of dead roach carcasses or some tape staining or something that was spilled somewhere, it's not like a real hip hop collection. So the best collections have had the majority of like, and as I think I told you, the one famous poster that you were finally able to get out of my hands when I acquired that photo of my friend's apartment, when he took the poster off the wall, there were literally 100 roaches behind the poster on the wall, and we had to like spray Raid. Although it was crazy, but that just proves it that the Holy Grails, you know, sometimes have some roaches attached to it. But that's just hip hop, and that's like New York City, and that's that, that you can't make that shit up.
So what Pete is talking about for our audience is a famous Phase Two poster, and it's probably my gem Phase Two piece in my collection. It's New York City Rap Tour. Pete, why don't you say a little bit about that poster?
Yeah, no, my boy Jay Blast had his copy. Frosty Freeze had given him it because Frosty was on that tour with Rocksteady. um, DX Graham X or DXT Phase Two, Bambaataa and the whole Zulu contingent. The Fearless Four was supposed to go on that tour but didn't make it. So you had like I think Dondi and Rem LZ. So you had like all of the pillars of hip hop culture at that time traveling to Paris and to London, bringing hip hop. Although it had been to overseas through other artists. This was like the real solidification of that and was received with such a celebration by people over there and made such a dent that the interest lingered and established a stronghold in Europe for hip hop. So that's why it's just so significant. But the poster itself is just like a masterpiece of Phase's designs because he did all the logos for every different artist and it was just like next level and of the ultimate rarity as well. Crazy Legs had his copy that I think he offered in one of the early Sotheby's, and that one was interesting because Crazy Legs pasted a picture of himself onto, I guess, part of the Rocksteady logo, and like that's where you look at condition. Like, is something that's mint condition on that poster better than his poster with his picture? I would kind of somehow I wouldn't mind going for the one with his picture because it was his, and also because that's a hip hop thing to do. Like have the poster up in your bedroom, and you tape a picture of yourself onto it.
Absolutely. And when you're talking about those posters, I mean, combined, we probably know of less than five in existence, right? And so it's not like you have a lot to choose from. You kind of take whichever one you can
Oh
get.
yeah, it looks, and I'm still looking for one to replace that one. But you made me an offer I couldn't refuse. That was definitely a Godfather moment you had there.
Well, I remember you used to bring that poster over to my apartment on 25th Street and taunt me with it. And
Yeah, well, I definitely wanted to fuck with you.
and
You tore me down. So what can I say?
I got you in a moment of
You're lucky.
weakness.
You're lucky. Russell Simmons wasn't paying us like like Jay Z. Jay Z got paid, or else I would never have sold that to you. You can thank Russell Simmons for that.
No, the one thing I remember about the Crazy Legs copy that he sold at Sotheby's was, I don't think the picture would have bothered me at all. I think, like you say, that's a very hip hop thing to do, and it's cool. I believe when that poster got to Sotheby's, I went and looked at it and inquired for a special viewing, and because it was something I was seriously interested in, and that poster was actually glued down to board. And even though if you're just showing it off and it's in a frame, I guess it doesn't matter. To me, it matters. Like having a poster that's not glued, I just feel like for preservation and future potential cracking, for transportation, just having one that's not glued down to me is preferable.
Yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, like if you could get that type of copy, sometimes like if you look, can you see the Fresh Fest poster behind me?
Yes.
But that is the original Fresh Fest poster, but it was on a board, like you said, like that one, and that's the only one I could find. Didn't have a choice, you know. So like you know how rare that poster is. So um, that's just the way it happens. Actually, my favorite poster from my career on third base, we did the big European tour, Fear of a Black Planet tour with Public Enemy in 1990, and I think it was at the Fridge in Brixton Academy in London, which is like the number one hip hop venue at that time. And there was this huge red, white, and blue poster featuring Public Enemy and us. It's just beautiful, and I mean, it's huge. It's like I showed it to you before. It's like 6 feet by 4 feet, one of these monster posters, and uh, a guy that I know had or see I didn't even get to steal that one from the venue. That's the way we usually got most of our posters, but it came through someone else who was generous enough to pass that along to me, and the and it was on a board. So, but that's the type of poster that those show poster and snipe posters are so fragile that probably if it wasn't on the board, it would be all beat up and would be frayed. But sometimes I kind of like it on a board if it's done, if it's a good job and well done, because it's easy to store. You don't have to worry about all the nicks and dents all over it. So I'm kind of like halfway in between. But I like you, I would prefer on like very rare early posters to actually just have the poster.
I've got a piece that I want to get your opinion on, or hear what you have to say about it. This is an original piece of artwork by an artist named Zephyr, done for the Wild Style movie.
Okay.
Have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean that's iconic. I mean with Charlie Ahern and the Wild Style movie, I mean the significance of that, for even for the terminology of hip hop, like when Charlie marketed the movie, he marketed it as the hip hop movie, and you can even see the influence. Like if you look at flyers from like 1982 on, hip hop was very rarely used in the main terminology or the advertisement of a show. And after Wild Style came out and just that terminology hip hop, although hip hop had been established as early as 1979, that's when like more of the commercialization of hip hop, and that's Wild, like I just said, Wild blending, the graffiti and writing culture. I mean, I think by the time me and my friends saw Wild Style, like Run DMC was coming out, so like there was a changing of the guard where it was almost kind of like yesterday, but he had captured exactly what was happening for that whole period of 5 years before that. And it really, and that's why it stands the test of time because it's just he caught like captured that in a time capsule. And and then you look at Easy AD, once again in his crazy collecting, he has his original T-shirt from the Japan tour, with the Wild Style logo by Zephyr. So, yeah, so I mean that's one of the most iconic, and I know that Charlie is another guy who has been great with the museum. Charlie donated to the museum his original prints, like the actual canisters with the reels of Wild Style, and
Wow.
yeah, so that's amazing. He also did a uh, a huge painting of called Dada Rock and his flyers, which is MC Dada Rock in his crib with all the flyers pasted on the wall behind him. It's a picture that Charlie took in his bedroom, right around 1982, and Charlie turned that into a screen press painting, which is incredible. And he also donated that painting to the museum as well. Um,
No, that's incredible. I mean, it sounds like he's been very generous with that, and you like to hear those stories of, the people who, are such figures in hip hop and early hip hop, maintaining
and
and being
and
involved.
one other incredible thing is like when you're in the position like I am as a curator of the Hip Hop Museum, you get to just see incredible stuff. So I'm going through Easy AD's material, and it's just a bunch of flyers, and I see this piece of paper that looks like a photocopy. It's been it's been you can see that it's been folded and was in his back pocket for a while, and is pretty worn, a little bit, torn up, and it just says Wild Style on top, handwritten, and it's like just a whole handwritten, looks like a handwritten letter. But what it was, if you know the famous scene in Wild Style where Fantastic Five and the Cold Crush have the battle on the basketball court, rhyming back and forth at each other. This is like Charlie's directions to the MC/actors as to what they're supposed to do. And like Easy AD saved that from putting in his pocket while they were filming it, and it survived to this day, which is, sick.
No, that is incredible. You mentioned test presses and acetates because I've been learning a lot and delving deep into them, and I wanted to bring up two things. One is your show that you did, Hip Hop Treasures, I believe, on A&E was fantastic, and it was great to see like all of these collectibles, but also the history of it. And so that project was awesome. I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about that. And the other thing is, uh, I have this, which is a handwritten, this is a handwritten test press of Rapper's Delight.
Right.
One of the 10 known to exist, 1979, Sugar Hill Gang, first commercial hip hop song. So please talk a little bit about Hip Hop Treasures.
Yeah. So Hip Hop Treasures was a show that Paradise and I had created in conjunction with the museum. Whereas, as the curators, the theme was that we were going to go out and track down artifacts and bring them back to the Bronx. Our original pitch to the networks and production companies was more American pickers, like me and Paradise going out in a van, into the hood, into different spots. And, as it got more into like, the A&E network and Pulse Films and all the people we were working with, they want to get, hey, how about we partner, and it, Paradise at the time, Paradise has always had a great relationship with LL Cool J. And at the time, we were talking to LL about some other projects, and we thought like, hey, why don't we, if we can bring LL onto the project with us, it'll sell immediately. And of course it did. So we brought LL on, and then LL had a problem with his contract with his CSI show because he could only show up on so many episodes on another network on a show. So we could only get him for 6 episodes, and we had 12 that we had to shoot. So then we went to Ice-T, obviously the other, hip hop TV star. And so we brought these like two stars into Hip Hop Treasures to work with us, which was a great experience. And we were able to go out and, track down just incredible stuff. So the test press that you have, when Cypher Sounds, DJ, radio personality for years, and comedian, uh, him and Yo Yo were on the show with us, and sometimes we would send them out to actually meet with, some of the legends. And Cypher went to Leland Robinson's house, and Leland was the son of Sylvia and Joe Robinson, and he maintains the archives that they have left. And with Master G, they revealed the test press of Rapper's Delight, the one like you have, but the one that Sylvia actually kept as her personal copy, which might have been the number one copy. The markings on them that sometimes you can distinguish, which in the line or how many were created. Now, I know that Leland also had the 2-inch master tape of Rapper's Delight as well. That's the one that we really wanted. He's agreed to loan the test press to us, so we're still working on trying to get the actual 2-inch reel in the museum. So,
N-
but yeah, and I know I remember that I was able to help you determine the handwriting on yours because Master G on the show actually recalled that he wrote out the writing on the test presses, right?
No, that's right. And from with your help, I was able to put together, of the 10 that are known to exist, 5 of them have pink writing, writing with a pink pen, and 5 have it with a black pen. And the copy I just showed you has black writing. the copy that Master G recognized of his own writing was with the pink pen.
Okay.
And that pink pen one is a beautiful piece. And I happen to know that one of them is coming to auction at the end of this year. So we'll get a chance to see what happens with that piece. But
Right.
I mean, to me, that's incredible. Master G writing it, sitting there after they, after they make this record that's really, in my eyes, the most important record in hip hop, and
Well,
him.
and really, when he wrote it, they really had absolutely no idea the impact that or how big it would be. I mean, there wasn't even they knew that there were others in production with Bobby Robinson with Rapping and Rockin' the House uh and Super Rapping with Flash, on Enjoy Records, but they beat everybody to the punch other than King Tim, Fatback, which you know of, and I don't know. You probably have the test press for that now too, do you?
Well, speaking of which, and I don't want to speak out of school, did you have any records you wanted to share with us today?
Oh, I mean, I know when you asked me to do this. Let me show you one thing first from Hip Hop Treasures
Yeah.
that was amazing that we tracked down. And, Melly Mel and Scorpio, my boys, and they actually had a part to play with me and Serge getting back together recently, them and Van Silk. And we had them on the Hip Hop Treasures show, and we brought them over to Sal Abatello's house from Disco Fever to have this little reunion. And Sal is another guy who has an incredible collection, another great hip hop archivist, and has curated his own Disco Fever collection through his whole career, which really included giving a lot of these guys their start at the Disco Fever. I mean, Flash got his first regular gig where he could go in there any night of the week from 1978 on. Although he was performing other places before, when hip hop really became hip hop, the Fever was his spot, and of course, this is the place where Scorpio, Melly Mel, Cowboy, they all hung out. So Scorpio revealed. Now this is a he has one of these funky jewelry cases where has a little light on there. So I'll take it out of the case so you can see it better. But this is a very significant and historic piece of hip hop jewelry. And if you note, I got the white gloves on here. So this is Scorpio's Mr. Ness. Like his MC name was Mr. Ness to start out. And in like around September 1978, Mr. Ness became the fourth member of what was previously the three MCs with Melly Mel, Cowboy, and Kid Creole, Melly Mel's brother, with Flash. So this is when they became the four MCs. And really, I mean, you see pictures of Kool Herc wearing medallions, Hollywood wearing medallions. Jewelry was definitely a thing, even if you look on some of the other flyers. But this is the earliest existing hip hop jewelry with diamonds, with the bling right there. And Ness is spelled out in diamonds on the nugget bracelet. So one of the earliest pieces of, significant hip hop jewelry. And this was featured in Vicky Toback wrote the book Ice Cold about history of hip hop jewelry. And I was able to help co-curate the Ice Cold exhibit at the American Museum of Natural History last year. So Scorpio loaned this piece to the Hip Hop Museum, and then we in turn loaned it to the Museum of Natural History for that exhibit. So just
That's incredible. And not only is that an incredible piece of jewelry and how it ties into the members of the Furious Five or what would become the Furious Five hanging out at Disco Fever, but correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, with the addition of Raheem making the five members, uh, I mean, talk a little bit about them and their central role in hip hop.
yeah, no, I mean when you look at the progression of guys like DJ Smokey, Kool Herc, Mean Gene, all these early guys. Mean Gene was a guy who actually Flash lived at his house for a certain amount of time with his brother, Grand Wizard Theodore. So that's what Flash came up in. And Flash said that he was doing his own little parties in 1973, the way Kool Herc and Smokey were. The difference was Flash said that when he went to a Smokey party as a dancer, there were 500 people at a apartment party. So the apartment was packed and the crowd extended all the way down the stairwell 5 floors to the street where that was like one moving party, like before there were like established clubs. So that's where Flash started. Then Flash added on Cowboy, Melly Mel, and his brother, Kid Creole. When they got to the point of having, Scorpio, Mr. Ness, they established themselves through their manager Ray Chandler, along with probably the L brothers, who actually Master Rob and Kevy Kev. I got to meet them over on 161st Street because they found some pictures possibly that the museum might be interested in. But those guys are the creation of what we know as the modern day MC, like syncopated rhymes, like not just the nursery rhymes, like really getting down and spitting, bars. And you can see at the time that they created it, right around late 1977 into 1978. 78 is kind of like the year of the MC. Now, Raheem was actually MCing at the same time for the Funky Four. So between the L Brothers, Funky Four, and the four MCs, that's like, like the foundational, you know, uh, you could also add Easy AD and those guys in their different iterations of Cold Crush Brothers and Fantastic Five. The L Brothers really became Fantastic Five in essence. So they there's more credit due to them than probably any other group in history. One for the element of performance, and then even when you lead up to like a song like The Message, like being like the first conscious hip hop, relating, the story of what's going on the street and getting beyond just like the boasting and party rap that, it all started with, Sugar Hill and those guys. But even like, Melly Mel's rhyme for, in The Message was actually, part of, the earlier record in 1979. So, that pre-existed that, but didn't really blow up until it was The Message. And, with Sugar Hill Records backing it up.
Yeah, I mean, so much of hip hop, it seems like, is just borrowing from here, things from here, borrowing for lack of a better word, and people get uncredited, like, Kaz or, but to be fair, that's not just in hip hop, like in comics. People used to swipe things directly from other artists and,
Right,
artists, fine artists, even in the fine art community, they would just steal things from comic artists because they weren't, they were looked down on, these silly
right,
comic artists. And, but the best, revenge is look how big it is today. And,
right,
it's not always fair to the pioneers who didn't get to reap, the same benefits. The Ditkos and the Kirbys didn't get to reap the same benefits that Disney is with these billion-dollar movies.
right.
Um, and probably the same things with hip hop. But at least in hip hop, you're starting to see, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're starting to see like guys like Rakim really get their due, and people coming out of the woodwork to support them. Is that fair, Big Daddy Kane? Is that fair or?
Yeah, I mean, if you just like Kane and Rakim, like two of my favorite MCs of all time, and I mean they've sustained their careers because they've been performing straight through for all these years. So they unlike other artists at the time, and you even look at Kane with his dance moves, he's still got it. He's at still at the top of his game. So they're like foundational MCs, and they definitely have gotten the respect through the years. But even like there's a organization called the Paid in Full Foundation. I know they Rakim got an award like 2 years ago. So no, I mean there's definitely like a lot of recognition, and that's like one of the things with the museum, like to actually recognize a lot of these guys. One, the ones who are the greats who have been known as the greatest, in hip hop for years, but also for like the guys who people really don't know about, who, are more important than some of the guys who were even known. Uh, that's uh, it's important for it's one of the most important things I look at, like our uh, job at the museum to shine light on those that really put in the work, created things, but really haven't been fully credited.
Can I share a couple things with you really quick? I want to see those records you mentioned, but we were talking about Flash, and this is a ticket from the Message Tour, which I believe is the first hip hop album tour. 1982, and
If you could consider it, those aren't really considered album. Like, I mean, when you look at the tradition of a hip hop rap album, kind of like more Houdini, Run DMC, like those records are really, in my eyes, more of like a real album. But no, like you said, it's like if it's EP or whatever you want to call it, but like to have someone come with like a whole concept record of what would lead into De La Soul and Public Enemy, like look at the theme albums and concept albums that came later.
no,
Like
that's
I take that
fair.
back to like rock and roll albums of the 60s.
No, no, that's absolutely fair. And which brings up an interesting point, because I've seen so much disagreement about this. What was the first hip hop tour?
Okay, so as far as I know, the Sugar Hill Rappers Convention tour in 1981 appears to be like the first official tour where it was going into arenas. They had uh, different legs of the tour. You see the evidence of the venue posters, but I believe that before that, at some time, you know, the Sugar Hill Gang and Curtis Blow, and we know we've seen some of the posters that they were on with some funk groups and R&B groups, and I, I I have seen some evidence in articles where a couple of these groups went out before that 1981 tour, maybe sometime in 1980. So, and the other question is, when was the first actual tour or mini tour in Europe? Because when you look at that whole 1982, Roxy tour, Sugar Hill Gang and Curtis Blow were out in Europe before everybody. Even Russell Simmons took Curtis Blow out to Amsterdam and other places in, I think, Sweden and the Netherlands in, early 1980. You
Wow.
know, with kind of like the breaks and with the success of Christmas rapping. So, really, like when, I mean, even when some of the breakers say like, "Oh, we brought it over there," like, well, Rappers Delight did make a little bit of a dent throughout the entire world because we have an exhibit here that we're working on when the museum opens. I mean, just like you're saying, like, a lot of guys like Kaz, Easy AD, original MCs, Kevy Kev, Master Rob will tell you that like when Rappers Delight came out, as like the real MCs who started this thing, they were not impressed by the rhymes of Big Bang Hank, Wonder Mike, and Master G, who, other than Big Bang Hank, who actually was working at the Sparkle and knew all these guys and was, from the Bronx, um, they weren't anyone who was, going to be feared, step into the mic at the Audubon Ballroom or whatever. And these guys looked at it like, yo, that's some bullshit. And then they saw how it blew up. And who would have known that there was going to be a whole rap record industry to develop from that? But the significance of that record actually created the backbone for everything that came after it. So you look at all the different countries that Rappers Delight was released in with promotional material, with different record. I mean, it's insane. Like I have a collection of maybe like 20 different records, 12 inches and 45s and promotion. DJ Ross has the the flyer that would go into the sleeve of the record that would offer all these promotional items from Sugar Hill, which included, the 8x10 promo pictures, the T-shirts, three different versions, and as well as like a felt pennant, that's about 24 inches long, and he was looking for years for this, and finally found a guy in Japan who had one, and he was able to get it for his rap tees collection. But you know, every the start of hip hop merchandising, the start of rap charting on the radio, like everything. So so when you say like hip hop went worldwide with Rapper's Delight.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I think that there's something else earlier from evidence of things that I see in articles and reports that, you know, I just, we'd have to get together Curtis Blow, Master G, and a couple other guys to kind of chart where they remember doing performances at different times. And, showing tickets and posters help some of these guys. Like, people show me things that I have no clue that the event happened, yet it did. Yet it did happen, like. And I feel that I have a pretty good memory, but like, you got to realize you're asking some of these guys something that happened 40, 50 years ago. It's a lot of times, you know off the top of your head, you're not going to come up with the exact date, but when you see a flyer or a photograph or something else that's a point of reference, you can just think about it more rationally.
No, I love that about the flyers and the posters. Just the information that they provide. It's always been something that I just think is so cool. From the prices, the dates, just the language used, and they're so cool. Please share your records.
Okay, let me grab some of these records here. All right, so as you know, I got my start, well, my real professional start with Russell Simmons when he signed me to Rush Productions, and then signed us to Def Jam after that. So, Russell at that time, obviously the biggest persona and person in hip hop. Many of us, though, didn't realize how deep he was into the origins of hip hop and promotion. And although Sylvia Robinson and Joe Robinson did, kind of blow up and basically create the inception of the hip hop label, like Russell was the one who really took it to the next level and, really made it more of the passing fad into like being ingrained into American culture. So DJ Reggie Wells was one of the early DJs, quote unquote disco DJs. He started as an MC at a lot of the clubs in New York City, Superstar, Cafe, places where even Curtis Blow started. And he did start out as an MC, just talking on the mic, saying what's up to people, shout outs, stuff like that, kind of like nursery rhyme type stuff. This is like 1975, 76. But then he started to spin and become an actual DJ. Became one of the most popular DJs on the club scene in New York City and in Harlem. And, if Curtis Blow was going to put out a record with Russell, they knew that Reggie, being like the top DJ in New York City, they wanted to get it played by Reggie at his club on the best night, Friday or Saturday night. And in 1979, that was at the Hotel Diplomat. I think Diplomat was kind of in Times Square area, or I think it was either by Madison Square Garden or Times Square. And on a certain night before Christmas, 1979, he gave Reggie this test pressing of Christmas rapping, and I had Reggie write his recollection. Curtis Blow gave me this test press of the song Christmas Rapping in 1979 at the Hotel Diplomat in New York City. It was the first time this record was ever played in public. Thanks, Curtis and DJ. So it's like he remembered, like, that's the night that I played it, and this is the copy of the record. Then he also had the breaks, and Curtis Blow gave me this test press of the breaks at Club Justine's in 1980. It was also the first record ever played in public for the breaks. Now, I noticed, because you're so into all the test presses and acetates, that this wasn't just the test pressing, like he said, but it was actually the acetate,
Wow,
which
that is
which I
amazing.
learned from you, I guess, is there were only two copies made. So And I think your boy Johnny, who yes, I still
Yeah,
I
that
still
is
get previous
amazing.
episodes, and just great stuff. But I was shocked that that there were only two of these made, and I know even from third base when we were mastering with Howie Weinberg worked with us, and he was like the master of fine tuning and mastering for vinyl and for the cassettes and everything. And when he was finished, there were these two copper plates. And Search, I think, got the A side for the Cactus album. I got the B side. And I mean, those are similar to like these acetates, but they're even the step, I guess, above to actually cut the vinyl like within, you know, the manufacturing process. Um,
Wow, that breaks piece is insane. And what you're talking about of of the Cactus album sounds really cool. I'm not sure whether it's like a mother or a father or what exactly it is. I'm sure Johnny would know much better.
right.
But the
Yeah. Well, the other thing that's cool about it, like, because Russell was my manager, I like know his handwriting, like on my contracts and everything. So I could tell that this is Russell writing Curtis blows brakes, Rush record promo to Reggie Wells. So, and on another one, I have this record. It's a test pressing of the song "Action" by Orange Crush, which was one of the samples used in Sucker MCs. And this is Russell writes Reggie Wells Justine's one of 10 test pressing. So he even says that there were 10 of these. And then he's writing Action Orange Crush, produced by Larry Smith and Russell Simmons, Rush Group Productions, Polygram, mixed by Jelly Bean. And on the bottom, he says, Reggie need WBLS report. So, like, he's even telling them to report it to the radio stations at the time with his instructions. So, it gives you kind of like the inside baseball of how, promoters like Russell would get out there and just, you know, pimp pimp the records and try to get them played everywhere. And that's really one of the things that Russell did better than anybody. And even to the point where he had his own record promotions company. That's what Rush really started out as, and it's one of these rare labels on this record, which I think is the Gap Band, the song "Humpin'." So Russell was involved in the funk and R&B and everything with his record promotions company. So I mean, and for someone like me coming up at that time, growing up, we were all about records. Like there weren't cassettes at that time released commercially until like probably the Sugar Hill the Sugar Hill records. But even at that time, that wasn't as you know 12-inch singles for DJs like a DJ like Clark Kent at a club. That would come like in 81, 82, 83.
Well, one of the things that Johnny mentioned to me was that he had never seen any test presses or acetates for groups like Wu-Tang or Mobb Deep. And I'm just thinking in the 90s, I mean, for you, was it kind of disappointing that in the 90s records like lost it wasn't they weren't the focus anymore. I mean, people were buying
Well,
CDs or
they were the focus for the DJs still because you're still playing the clubs or even with Daddy Rich, our DJ for a show, shows, he'd always have his vinyl for little interludes that we would do at the beginning and the middle of the show. But when you had CDs come into their own, that even more so than the cassettes, really started to kill vinyl for public consumption and record sales. So that was kind of the fall off there, and that's even where you see. I never even saw a third base test press. I haven't seen anyone come up. I've seen a couple of KMD with Doom. I have a test press of I think Mr. Peach Fuzz, the song Peach Fuzz, but there probably are a couple of third base ones out there. But like I think Johnny said, the one thing they stopped making any test presses starting like that's why you don't see probably the Wu Tang and other ones because they would probably just get the promo records done quick and get those out to the main DJs. And we had that whole conversation about what was that spot that would do the acetates?
oh, Sunshine Sound.
Sunshine Sound. So like it wasn't like that day had been over where you could, do your own mix. Actually, I have this is crazy here because DJ Smokey, who was before or at the same time as Herc, you know, and this is when you started out. They started out playing just one record at their parties in like 71, 72, and then incorporated the two turntables in the mixer late 72, 73. And he actually, we went to recently to his first MC's mother's apartment. He had passed away years ago, and he had a child with one of the early breakdancers with Smokey's sister Boo. She was down with the Smokatrons and the Luckatrons. And Smokey enlisted in the Army in 1978. And he left his mixer and his records and a lot of stuff with his boy Knowledge. And sure enough, in a closet in his mom's crib were a large portion of Smokey's 45s and his records. And there was one Sunshine sound there that has the name of it crossed out, as a lot of these early DJs would do. I have not tried to play this to see what record it is, but this stuff. These DJs did try to get their own personal mixes, even at Sunshine Sounds. As the labels did, like you said later, do those special test presses.
No, Pete, this is fantastic, and I don't want to take too much of your time. Will you show one more item? I see that jacket behind you, which is beautiful, but I'll let you pick whichever. Show us one more item, and then we'll let you go.
All right, I'll actually show you quickly. I'll show you three items.
Okay, sounds good.
You get three for the price of one.
I'm not in a rush, by the way. I just want to be respectful of your time.
No problem. Okay, so when you talk about like the foundational history of hip hop, the people that really catapulted it into the mainstream way before anyone thought it could be an industry, obviously, Kool Herc gets most of the credit, and as he should. And when that auction at Christie's, where you acquired those other, important flyers, there was this index card that was for a Herc performance and party at this place called Top of the Lane. It was a little club setting on this place called Featherbed Lane, and it was more of like an after hours party. Coke Rock says it's where a lot of the hustlers, a lot of the drug dealers would basically hang out, and it was kind of like a VIP crowd for these parties. And this actual index card invite was written out by Kool Herc in his handwriting, like the other earlier ones. The one that was sold at Christie's from 1974 was written out by Cindy, and that's just an incredible piece of history. And then this one, which Herc's brother had, is actually another party at 1520 Sedgwick, which was October 19th, 1973. So, Herc did several parties at 1520, even before the August 11th, 1973. And he had been doing parties even before that at other. They didn't move into 1520 Sedgwick until some point, I think early 73. So in 72, he was doing parties at some other locations as well. But this one is important too, because you see at the top, it says masterpiece.
Yeah.
Top. On a lot of these parties, there was a song, I think, I don't know if it was Earth, Wind, and Fire or Kool and the Gang, that had a song called Masterpiece that came out. Like, so the hot song on the radio at that point, some of the parties would name, in conjunction. That's how they, name the party to get people to show up. And 35 cents, refreshments sold. You can't get more hip hop than that. However, you might not look at what was going on at this party as hip hop, because Herc was just basically playing records. Now, he was playing records by James Brown that, and maybe he was playing Baby Huey with records that had breaks, but it wasn't as if things were fully formulated at that time. But I think a lot of people get caught up in wanting a start date, and they really don't realize, like, the slow and quick evolution of hip hop in a period of only 10 years. Like if you it's 2025, we go back to 2000. That's 25 years. Hip hop hasn't changed. Like if you look how much hip hop changed from 1973 to 83 when the message came out, and then look how little it's changed from 25 back to 2000, it's crazy that so much innovation happened with these guys just in this short period of time, which all this great. Now, one of the guys who it's kind of like a forgotten founding father of hip hop is Disco King Mario, who was doing his thing right at the same time that Herc was, right at the same time, that Flash and everybody else were. This is his personal photo album, from the Bronxdale section of the Bronx. And these are Polaroid photos of him, one of which of him DJing a party in Bronxdale and possibly at junior high school 123. And his girl Gladys, a couple of love notes on there from about him and Gladys being together at the time. So this is another like incredible item that we acquired from Mario's mother, who Mario's family came from North Carolina, and his mom was still down there. And yeah, we've just had a lot of support from a lot of people who just have helped us tremendously.
No,
Um,
that's incredible.
and
Hey,
the last one, which you've seen before, but not maybe this up close, and this is more of a personal item, is my actual rhyme book.
oh boy.
From, I have a couple of earlier rhyme books, but this is probably like from late '88 on. Actually, you can see '88. It was my rhyme book is a Tiffany Tiffany Jewelry Store 1988 day book that I used to be a security guard at Tiffany's when I was in college at Columbia, and I'm pretty sure we had an employee. There was like an employee sale, and I probably picked this up for like $2 and started writing rhymes in it, and it became my main rhyme book. Now on the back cover, Rush Productions had these mailing labels. I just slapped a Rush label on it, and we were just in the studio with Doom, and he just hit up his Sambo character and just signed it X because most people say like, oh, when did he become a Doom? Was always Doom because he was Daniel Dumoulin, and all his friends would call him Doom. I only called him Doom, but I never called him Zevlov X. Like, but he would sign his name back at that point, just an X, a circled X, and he hit that up with the iconic Sambo character, which was the anti-Sambo. And I mean, this just to show you the level of craziness. This is a receipt for a chicken parmesan hero at this place called the Italian Food Center, right outside of Center Street at Chungking Studios. And I wrote part of my verse for the song Triple Stage Darkness on the back of this receipt for chicken parmesan. Chicken parmesan. So, you know, that's that's the level of like stupidity that now you look and you're like, wow. And believe me, I have found other artists who have had similar weird shit where they would, write a lyric on, paper bag or like, but it's crazy.
No, that is insane and a great way to end it. Although I do want to say at some point I'm going to try and pry away one of your canes because I think that would be a showstopper piece to
Yeah,
add to
well,
my collection.
oddly enough, it's much harder to do that because I really years ago I got my house robbed, my summer house. They stole all of my canes and all my gold records. So a fan who became a close friend years later, my boy Chris Money in Miami, he heard that my gold records had gotten stolen. He called up the company that makes them for RAA, and he had replacements made and gave them to me for my birthday, which was incredible. But I only found two of my original canes in my storage, so it'd be tough to pry. I only got two, so
Were they ones that had been
no,
used in
no,
iconic moments?
they were not the ones. Like they got the robbers got the iconic ones. So yeah.
That is heart-wrenching. I mean, that's really
Well,
sucks.
and the sad part about it is the police told me that it was like, I don't know, a bunch of meth heads or whatever, and they probably thought that the gold records were made of actual gold and thought they could melt it down. And all of the canes had either, like 14 karat gold tips or sterling tips, and they probably just went to a pawn shop or melted them down or whatever, like the jewels at the Louvre.
Oh, well, I mean that it really is sad because that is, one of, if not, that's one of the things that definitely I think a lot of people identify you with. So that's a shame for sure.
Well, listen, I this has been great, and actually, I do have to leave as well because I have to meet Kevy Kev and Master Rob over by the courthouse in the bar.
No, thank you so much, Pete. I really appreciate it, and we'd love to have you back anytime. But good luck with the museum and all your other endeavors. But thanks again.
No, and thank you for your support of the museum as well, and look forward to chopping it up with you in the future.
Great. Thank you for tuning in.